YouTube, it doesn't make a difference. I'm just going to share the page. There you go. Very good. You have two options. Okay. This Gemara actually, you got it?
No, I was waiting for it.
What are you waiting? What are you trying to get onto?
YouTube.
Okay, now you go. Here you go.
Oh,
So if you put on the mute, you can hear it from me live.
it's weird.
Yeah. But as Zoom will be live, this is probably off by a second. Yeah.
I lost you.
Okay, so why don't you put down the sound? Okay. So there you go.
You make a bigger one.
Well, the things like this, we're learning a piece of Talmud that kind of leads into a piece of Talmud. The Talmud that we're holding in Shabbos, it's in the page. We're going to go through it kind of quick in the beginning, just to get to the piece we want to get to, is talking about different plagues or diseases that hits people collectively, and what's the lesson we could learn from it. Like if something's happening, everyone's trying to figure out what's COVID about, what is this about. So there's things that are happening to our lives. So that the Talmud doesn't ignore the Torah. The Torah doesn't ignore the idea that we have to pay attention to what's going on around us. Like the Rambam says, if there's things happening, you pay attention. That's why we have the whole Tractate of Kindness, the laws of fasting. We try to figure out what are the things that are happening.
I have to go. Thank you for coming to teach us.
So the Gemara says like this. In mid-conversation about talking about the different disease, the different plagues, the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanan come and learn, the rabbis taught. Arbe Simonin Haim, there's 4 signs that we should pay attention to. Siman la Avera, if you want to know if people were transgressing different Averos, if you see it in the disease of Hidrokoin. Hidrokoin was a kind of sickness that the body would bloat and retain water, or the stomach would explode and retain water, and that was very deathly, evidently. And so if you see that as a pandemic, so that means that there's a lot of averot going on. Averot usually sometimes also mean, and just averostam would mean in relationships. If you want to know what's the sign of sinos chinam, of hate, hate is yirakoin, which is jaundice. Like what do you have it? What do we call it today? Hepatitis. Yeah, jaundice. Simon agasis haruach, ego, is anios, is poverty. See, poverty, it's a sign that there's too much ego. Rashi says it's not poverty in money so much as poverty in Torah. Why? Because if a person is studying, it doesn't have ego. So to study Torah, you have to be humble. So humbling yourself to study Torah. So if a person finds that they're poor in their study of Torah, it's maybe they're struggling with an inner ego. Siman lashon hara, and the sign of lashon hara, slander, is askara. Askara is like, we're not going to go to the footnotes now for Rabbi Steinzatz, but askara was a kind of a disease that was that started from the stomach but went to the throat. And if you didn't have a way of healing it, it caused swelling in the throat, and in children it was very dangerous. But the idea that it's in the throat comes to teach us that something that's communicating through your mouth, which is slander. So the sign that that's slander. So we all know that the classic sign of lashon hara is, we just learned about it a few weeks ago, is leprosy. It's a ras. But here the Gemara says there's another sign. The sign is askara, this swelling of the throat that was very dangerous and started from the stomach. Okay, so that's what the rabbis taught. The Gemara continues. Tan Rabbanan. Askara bala olam, the Gemara says there's another opinion why askara, which is again this throat infectious disease, comes to the world. We're going to turn the page to 33b. Interesting that the tractate in Shabbos that we're soon going to learn that deals with the story of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is on page 33. All right, no, everything's amazing in Torah. Is ala meiser, people who didn't tithe. Again, why? Because tithing is a food. We're talking about tithing with the foods. and therefore it's something you eat and you consume. So you're consuming foods that have not been tithed. So the punishment is a punishment of something related to the throat and swelling of the throat. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Aloshen Hara. Again, the rabbis are quoting a second time. So there's two opinions. One opinion is that this askra comes from a lack of tithing, and the other one comes from evil talk, from slander. So Omer Rava v'Itamer Rabbi Shimon Levi. Rava says, and others say it's quoted in the name of Rabbi Shimon Levi, who lived in Eretz Yisrael, who was a student of Rabbi, and actually very much also connected to the story of Lag BaOmer or of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, because we learned that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is visited by Elijah the prophet, and Rabbi Shimon ben Levi would go meet Elijah the prophet in that same spot. He knew that's the spot that Elijah would go to, so he would go to the same cave, even though it was many years later. We don't even know if Rabbi Shimon ben Levi saw Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. If they did, very little time, because Rabbi Shimon ben Levi lived after the conclusion of the Mishnah. He was a student of Rabbi. So it would be very unlikely that he had much to do with Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai personally, although he could have been a spiritual student of his, but he would meet Elijah the prophet at that same cave. So others say Rabbi Shimon Levi says, Mikra, what's the support of a verse that to teach us that this is something created with speech? It says, V'hamelech yismach belikim yishal kol anishba boy ki yisocher pi divrei shakar. So he quotes a verse in Tehillim that says, but the king shall rejoice in God. Everyone that swears by him shall glory. For the mouth of them that speak lies shall be stopped. So we see that someone who speaks things that they shouldn't be speaking, Lashon Hara, their mouths get stopped with this disease that hits the throat. Okay. So now the Gemara asks a question, and she's going to lead us into our topic today. Ibailu, the Gemara asks, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yossi, Lashon Hara Kamar, Oidim Af Lashon Hara Kamar. Is Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yossi saying that it's comes from a lack of tithing and for slander, or only for slander? Huh? You want to know, is it two things or one thing? So Tashma, and now we go into our story. Come in here. Rabbi, I'm going to just say something that the class I'm giving today, which really starts from here, is inspired by a teaching in a class I heard from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. It's a wonderful, wonderful class on this piece of Gemara. The Tashma, come in here. When the teachers, meaning the Rabbi Seinu, our teachers, came into the Kerem Yavna. Everyone haven't heard of Kerem Yavna? I think there's an organization called Kerem Yavna. Kerem Yavna literally means the vineyard by Yavna. What's significant about Yavna? Everyone knows that in the destruction of the second temple, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is ushered out, hidden in a oron, in a what do they call it? A box. He meets the general of Rome, and he asks two questions. He asks him for two things. One is for a doctor for Rabbi Tzadok. Three things. One is the doctor for Rabbi Tzadok. He asked that they should protect the family of the Nasi, which was Rabbi Gamliel at the time. He was in hiding. And to save Yavna v'chachameha, Yavna and its scholars, which that was where the Sanhedrin moved to. So the Sanhedrin made different stops. Here it went to Yavna. Eventually it makes its way north to Tveria and Tzipori, which is by Rebbe, and then later, of course, under Rabbi Yochanan, the center of Jewish teaching and study in Eretz Yisrael is in the north, in Tveria or Tzipori. So when our rabbis came to the Keren, to the vineyard of Yavna, some people say, why is it called Keren b'Yavna? It should just be called Yavna. Keren b'Yavna, either some say that it was actually literally it was right next to the yeshiva, was in a good spot. The yeshiva was right next to the vineyards, or that the Keren, the vineyards, vines are planted in rows. So to the yeshiva was rows, everyone sat in rows, so they called it Keren b'Yavna. So when the rabbis came to Keren b'Yavna, who was sitting there? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yavna, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon. So there was, I think this is a mistake. Yes, this is a mistake in the print of Rabbi Steinsaltz. It shouldn't be Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, it should be Rabbi Yossi, like in the English. So they're sitting there, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon. Who are we talking about? Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Shimon is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. These are all students of Rabbi Akivah. Now, what time are we talking about in our history? We're talking about after the fall of Beitar. This story happens after the fall of Beitar, after Bar Kochba, after their teacher Rabbi Akiva is murdered. That was around that time. So this was a very hard time for the Jewish people. They're recovering from, this was known as Dor Hashmad. I mean, Rabbi Steinsaltz says is that at that time, in that war and the after effects of the war, almost 1 million Jews were killed. And that was a lot of Jews for any time, it was a lot of Jews for that time specifically. So that was a big happening. So they're just recovering. And slowly it kind of got a little better after that. In the times of Rebbe, we know that Rebbe is very close to Antoninus, to the Roman emperor, etc. But in this time, they're kind of just getting over this destruction of Beitar. So here they're sitting in Yavna, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon. They asked them the question. Makazu, the askara, which is the throat swelling. Why does it start in the stomach and leads to the throat, to the mouth? So Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai reisha medabrim b'chol makom v'amar. So Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Ilai, we know he's buried in the north. People go to him till today for special blessings. I believe people go there for marriage. Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. Someone wants to get married, right? Is that where we go?
No, that's not the one.
No? That's a mukha?
A mukha for sure. And then
Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, why did we go to Rabbi Yehuda bar Nasa?
Who's buried in a mukha is
someone else. Okay. Well, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai is buried, I think, on the way between Sfat and Miron. I think he's on the side of the road, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. So Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai is known as Rabbi Yehuda. So it says, in the story, the Talmud tells us, why does he speak first? It says, he's the one who speaks first in every situation. So therefore, he speaks first. So what does he say? He says, even though your kidneys kind of are called the kidneys of yoitzes, they're trying to figure things out, and the heart understands, and the tongue forms the words, but who actually communicates? What part of your body is your mouth? And therefore, although when you have something evil or bad to say or nasty to say, slander to say, you're not just saying something, it's coming from a deeper place. It has its deeper roots within what's going on in yourself. But what part of your body actually communicates it is the mouth, and therefore the mouth is the one that gets struck. Then Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Yossi, says, because you eat the wrong things. You're eating things impure. So therefore the mouth gets punished. The Gemara says, you need to say they eat impure things. They were eating foods that are not fixed. So we see that Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi holds that both things. One is that the Meiser issue, that you're not eating food that's been taken tithings, and you're also talking slander. Then Rabbi Shimon says, the reason why Achsra happens also from the mouth is because people don't study Torah enough.
Don't we buy food or purchase food or receive food that we've already known has been either misered or I mean, we trust the vendors, etc. So how do we get in trouble for eating stuff that hasn't been tied properly?
First of all, this goes into the subject of what level of hashkafa are you careful with? Like, if you go into different stores, not every store is running the same level of stringency on the hashkafa. Some people are more careful. There's other laws. Sometimes people are not careful at all. You have to, not all the fruits and vegetables are being tithed properly or not at all. So and those days they didn't have the system we have today.
We trust all this people.
Never so it's become separate. Take the nicest between the who doesn't matter what he bought.
Who does?
With never so.
He's more careful. So,
and also the line to the house, but you drive me down from the north and you go by the food stand.
You don't know what they are.
You don't know what they don't take anything.
And you don't even know who's the origin, where it comes from. Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, and also those days they didn't have the hashgacha system we have today. We're not going to do the Rashi's anything on this. I just want to point out Rashi says again, why was it called Keren B'Yavne? Because they had rows. And also, who decided? Now the question is, who decided that Rabbi Yehuda speaks first? Gemara says he's Rosh Medabrim, the one who speaks first. Who decided that? Who gave him that title, that schus, that merit? So Rashi says, B'mitzvahs HaMelech, the king, meaning to say the government who ran Eretz Yisrael at the time with the Romans, they passed the law. One of the laws they passed was Rabbi Yehuda has to be the first to speak. No, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. This is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. He's a colleague of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he's a colleague of Rabbi Yossi. So they're all sitting together in Keren B'Yavne. That's where they would hang out. That was the yeshiva. That's where Torah was studied. And they asked this question about why does the Askara come first? So Rabbi Yehuda gives the first idea is that because the mouth is the actual communication of things that you shouldn't be speaking. Rabbi Yossi says it's because Rabbi Yossi says because he's eaten the wrong foods, and Rabbi Shimon says because of Divrei Torah, one is Bittul Torah that doesn't study Torah. All right.
Well, they're trying to get to the bottom from ultimately, this is how we cure this. Is that?
Well, how do we avoid it?
Or okay.
How do we avoid it? Or fix the problem?
Right. Okay.
Okay.
That's what I
Yeah.
mean.
Which is the thing you're avoiding.
Bittul Torah means we're trying to avoid Achsara. Achsara is this disease.
The three things that
could cause the Achsara. Okay. So the question is why Achsara was not just a sore in the mouth. It literally caused death.
Because it's strangulation.
Strangulation, exactly.
And you don't have the ability to breathe.
You never breathe, exactly. Because
if you're not an academic, if you're not a Torah scholar, if you're not why do you get hammered for that?
No, it's a good question. So the thing is, each person according to how much you have to study. There's certain people we say the Torah says you could be Yotze, Perek Echad Shachris, Perek Echad Arbis, like just a little law in the morning. Everyone can open up the chabad.org or your preferable website and study a quick law.
This is a three thing.
Yeah.
For Hashem, right? That's the Raisa, then the Mishnah.
Exactly. Then we have it in the morning.
You fulfill your mitzvah.
You fill Talmud Torah. I mean, minimally. Yeah. So, but why would you get punished with death for this? So, Meiser is Misa B'dei Shemayim. So it means these are all things that are punishable by death from heaven. The question is, how does it happen? So it happens through the punishment of Achsra. If it's Meiser, and so what's Bittul Torah? Because the pasuk says, "L'man yirbu yimechem ha'loi talmudu yisma'atu." If it says you want a long life, learn Torah. That's what it says in the Torah. "L'man yirbu yimechem." If you learn Torah, you're going to have a long life. Which means if you don't learn Torah, you're not going to have such a long life. So, and what's going to cause it? Rabbi Shimon says Achsra. You have to imagine the ability to have such a conversation in such a stressful time. Like we're talking about a time that's right after it's the middle or the end of the Dar Hashmad, the Dar of destruction. 1 million Jews are killed, and they're sitting there in the Keren Hayavna, and they're trying to figure out, where does this disease come from, and how do we fix it? Like you're saying, so you have to imagine. I mean, they're able to separate themselves from the happenings around them to discuss important issues. But
again, I'm the furthest guy from having any real Torah background, but didn't Governor Melech also say, we don't know why this guy is doing so well? It was Governor Melech who said, we don't know why this one is doing so well, or this guy's getting blasted, or this is now all of a sudden it's according to the Exile, it sounds like we do know.
We do and we don't. That's the thing. That we do and we don't. Meaning to say that we have to pay attention to the things that are going on around us. That's the Rambam says. If a person doesn't pay attention to what's going around you, he has a very harsh language. The Rambam says that's cruel. Achzarius. It's cruel not to pay attention when Hashem is talking to you sometimes through judgment. He calls it cruel. Like God's trying to talk to you and you're saying Mikra Ikra. Like this, just happened. The pandemic started because some rat was let loose from the hospital, from the lab in China. And Rambam says that's cruel. That's being cruel to God. means God runs the world and has reasons. He's saying that God just allowed some rat to get loose from the lab, and that's why how many people died? Millions of people died in COVID. So the Rambam says we have to. The halacha says we pay attention to it. Simultaneously, you make a good point. Why did the righteous die? Why did things happen? We don't understand everything, but we do have to pay attention to what we can understand. Yeah. But the Gemara actually asks your question now. 1 second. If Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, because of the sin of Talmud Torah, what about women? Women get the achsra, a disease. What did they do wrong? They have no obligation biblically to study Torah. It's only biblical for men. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Shimon answers a tough answer. If the women don't allow their husbands to learn, and they're the cause of the husbands not studying Torah, then they could get afflicted with this disease. Then what about the goyim, the nations? They surely don't have the law of studying Torah. Why do they get punished with achsara, with this disease of the mouth, like the rabbi said, that chokes a person from breathing? Because they do things that make the Jewish people not learn. So they're also causing. This is not a good Gemara to learn in the political climate that's being discussed. So they might say, what about the children? This is the harshest of all answers. What about the children? What do the children do? So the Gemara, and we get a little insight to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai zealousness that we're going to get to now from the answer he answers here. The children also they act up and they don't allow their fathers to study. And because of that, they also get punished of the disease of Achsra.
Really? They blame it on the children of the parents?
That's what he says. That's actually a good point. It could be that the parents are not being good. They're not doing time management well, or not figuring it out good enough, but they're indirectly the cause of that. It's a Shemvatim Savir. I want to see let's see what Rabbi Steinzal says. That is pretty harsh. So he answers, for they are not obligated to study Torah, that they suffer from Asra. He answered them, they punished because they caused their fathers to be idle from the study of Torah. He doesn't give more information on that. Rashi says, what does Rashi say? Rashi says the children are demanding attention from the fathers, needing to drink or to eat or to have egoism is nuts, but what we would call today candy. They're just nudging their parents for things and disrupting their fathers from learning, and that's why. And again, this is harsh stuff. But then they say, what about the yeshiva students who learn, the young students, the Tinoka Shabbat Rabban? They don't sin, they study Torah. Why do they get asked? This kind of touches on Ronnie's point. So Hasek Rab Gurion, then we could answer like Rab Gurion. The Omer Rab Gurion, it's the first time I'm ever hearing this name of Rab Gurion. B'item Rab Yossi Rab Shmaya, also a new name. Bisman Shat Tzadikim Bador, Tzadikim Nitfosim Al Hador. When there's righteous people in the generation, the righteous take the brunt of the blow. I just saw the Rebbe talked about in the Holocaust. Someone asked the Rebbe, why did so many righteous people get punished in the Holocaust? So at the end of the day, Tzadikim have to suffer. Why? That's another discussion. Why did Tzadikim? Maybe because they're not influencing enough, maybe because, but what have you? The Gemara says, Reb Gurion or Reb Yossi, Reb Shmai says, because the Tzadikim take the brunt of the punishment. What happens if there are no Tzadikim? If we could stop right there. What kind of generation doesn't have Tzadikim? Right? The Gemara says, what happens if there's no Tzadikim? So what happens if there's no Tzadikim? Ain't Tzadikim Bador. The whole generation doesn't have Tzadikim, not just in the neighborhood.
There have to be a righteous person. Righteousness is in gauge of where the generations are. So, I mean, even if you have a very low generation, I mean, you may not have been.
I mean, like Noah of his times, according to one of the opinions of Rashi. But it seems to be we're talking about righteous. So then the Gemara continues. Then then the children who study Torah, they're the ones who take in place of the righteous, and that's why they would get this askara, this mouth disease, this breathing disease, because there's no tzaddikim. Amrab Yitzchak Ba'Ziri, Amrle Amrab Shim ben Nizira, Micro, what's the verse to support this? Im teidilach hayafa benashim tzilach bikviatzon v'amrinan gedoyim hamushkanim al haroim. The pasuk talks about that you should be careful with the children, but it finishes off the young goats that are like collateral to the shepherds. And the young children of our generation are the collateral. If our young children are studying Torah and the generation is doing the right thing, then they're okay. If we see that the yeshiva students are suffering, it's not a reflection on them, it's a reflection on the generation, because they are taking the pain for the generation. They're the mashkin, they are the collateral. And we see so here, from back to this whole story, that they asked the rabbis and they gave an opinion that the reason why we have askara is for evil talk, and there's a reason also because he mentions, because Rabbi Yossi says also because of Meiser. We see that there's both things. There's Meiser and evil talk that could cause the achsara, the disease. Okay, that's the story of how they discuss this subject in Yavna, Kerem the Yavna. Now the Gemara says, time out.
What is it to
Rabbi Shimon. Gemara says, time out. Why does Rabbi Yehuda get this title? Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, we said he spoke first because he's the one who speaks first at all in all sittings. Why does he deserve such a title? So the Gemara answers the question. There was another story. Evidently, that was the club. It was like mamish, like this yeshiva here. A few years ago, I hosted. Someone asked me. Rabbi Sverdlov asked me to host a group from California. About 50 people came for Friday night from the Federation. I don't think any of them were Shabbos observant that I was aware of, because all of them had their phones on. They were videoing the whole meal, so I was. That's a good giveaway. That was a good giveaway. So I started off with this piece of Gemara, meaning to say, like Rabbi Steinsaltz says, that one of the ideas of the yeshiva was an intellectually safe space. That the rabbis needed to be able to discuss properly issues. They needed to know that whatever happens in the yeshiva stays in the yeshiva. That their opinions won't go outside of the discussion hall, because otherwise they're going to say, "Oh, he said this," and people are going to start quoting you outside of the yeshiva hall, and people are going to be intimidated to give their free opinion. Did you know what he said today? So the philosophy was so much so that the Rambam quotes, and the Gemara tells about a person who tattletaled about something 30 years later. They said, he's a person whose mouth is running. You can't trust him with anything, because he quoted something that he heard 30 years before in the yeshiva. It means the yeshiva is supposed to be a safe space. So I told the Chevre from this federation, I said, listen, guys, tonight the yeshiva is in our house, and you guys should feel like it's a safe space so you can share ideas and questions and not feel like you should be intimidated. And it was like that. The whole night people discussed things in their family, in Yiddishkeit, in education. It was really a very opening conversation. People felt very safe. So that was the environment of the yeshiva. So these Chevre, Rabbi Yehuda, I'm sure that's the environment here, right? So Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when they would sit together, they felt that this was a safe space to be able to talk. So that's the story. The Yosef, there was another time they were sitting. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon, the three buddies. The Yosef, Yehuda ben Gerim Gabayil. Now, the Gemara calls him Yehuda, the son of converts, plural. Rashi says both his parents are converts. Now, the Gemara doesn't give him a title of. No, Rabbi Akivah wasn't. These are all students of Rabbi Akivah. It's after he was murdered. So Rabbi Akivah lived very long. He lived a little bit in the time of the Second Temple. He was killed after Bar Kokhba. He died at 120. He was murdered at 120. So he lived long. So he only went into study of Torah at 40, as we know. So they're sitting there together, and Yehuda, the son of the converts, is there. The Gemara doesn't give him a title of Rebbe. Tosfos actually says no, that's a wrong version. His name was Rebbe Yehuda ben Gerim. He was a student. He wasn't just because the story is not nice about him. So Tosfos wants us to know that he wasn't a bad person. He was a Torah scholar. He was a student of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Yosef Yehuda ben Gerim Gabayu Pasach Yehuda V'Amar. So Rabbi Yehuda said like this. So as Rabbi Steinsaltz tells beautifully in the story, usually they sat together. What did they discuss in Kerem V'Yavna? They would discuss questions like the previous question. What's our law? What's the reason, or why do diseases happen? Something that's connected to Torah Avoda. Here they decided to go into conversation of politics. They figured they took a break of Torah study and they got into a political conversation. What was the political conversation? Rabbi Yehuda started and he said like this. Pasuk Rabbi Yehuda v'amar kama noim masem shel umazu. How great are the Romans? This is again, you have to remember, this is after the destruction of Beitar, 1 million people killed. You have to remember that time, it took ages for the bodies to be buried. They really came hard on the Jewish people. It was not a pleasant time. So this is like really post, and they're trying to make like a sikum, an evaluation of how things were. So Rabbi Yehuda says, they're actually not so bad, as far aside the fact that they killed 1 million people and Rabbi Akivah. But if you look at it in the bigger picture, from a management point of view, they're not such bad people. Why? Tiknu shvakim, they make markets. Tiknu gesharim, they put up bridges. So we're talking about infrastructure. Tiknu mechatzos, they put out bathhouses. So if you want to look at it as far, it means that we could have had worse people that conquered our country. They would just leave it destitute. These people at least restructured the Eretz Yisrael. They put up markets, and they put up bridges, and they put up bathhouses. That was his opinion about the political situation. So he was giving, he was kind of in all giving a good rating to the Romans. Rabbi Yossi Shasak, Rabbi Yossi stayed silent. He thought better not to give an opinion. He didn't want to share an opinion on the subject. He was quiet. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, "Whoa, the first time we know what Rabbi Shimon talking about. I disagree." And this is the same Rabbi Shimon who said before that the children were dying because of the parents. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, it's all selfish. They had no interest to help the society or what have you. This was all personal, selfish. Everything they did was for themselves. Why did they make the marketplaces? Because at marketplaces, they wanted to put the prostitutes out in the marketplace. So there should be whatever they felt the need of the prostitutes to be there, whether it's for their own income or for services. But they wanted to make settings for there to be inappropriate behavior. So that was for their own benefit. Why did they have bathhouses? There's adin behematzman. It's only for them to be able to sit in the bathhouses. We know the Romans are very into their bathhouses, and that was like the golf course of the time. That was where they discussed things and the exercise. Most business was done in the merchatzos. It was also a way of making sure you had nothing on your body. It was a safe space. So they have the merchatzos. They have the bathhouses for their own personal use. Gisharim, why did they have? Why did they make bridges? Litum hemechas, to take taxes. There's a toll. So it was all selfish. And this is the discussion they're having in Keren B'Yavna. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is silent. Rabbi Yehuda gives a good ratings to the Romans, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, no, they're horrible. We know Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was more of a zealot. I mean, he's the one who says Halach Esav hates son of Yaakov. Rabbi Shimon is the one who says Esav, and Rome is Esav, hates Yaakov. That's a law. There's no such thing. There's no kindness. He never saw Rome in any kind of positive view. Rome was horrible. Rome hates the Jews. The Western civilization hates the Jews, and that's how he saw it, and he stuck with that. And if you say you want to tell me otherwise, it's personal. There's an agenda.
Did you say that both of those outlooks still exist today with the Jewish tribes?
Absolutely.
Again?
He wants to know if that this discussion could be had today.
But who's are it's like, so you look at the buildings, the big things, parking lots.
Yeah.
A no-brainer.
So what happened? Yehuda ben Gerim went the Sipur Debrayim, and he told over the conversation. So the yeshiva is supposed to be a safe space, and Yehuda ben Gerim starts to say, you know what they were talking about today in the Beis Medrash. He went on a political conversation. So Yehuda ben Gerim says, Sipur Debrayim. Who did he tell to? Rashi says Sipur Debrayim. He told it to Talmidim, to the students. Means he didn't run to Rome. Because Rashi also agrees with Tosfos. He wasn't a bad guy. It was an exciting conversation, and he didn't hold his counsel. Or it says La'avi B'limai. I don't know why he would say that, but Rashi says, or maybe he said it to his parents. Lo'ili Shmiel L'Malchus. He didn't want to go tell on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai or tell on the conversation. He just talked. But when you start talking, and it's an interesting conversation in the times that it was. The subject in the conversation, Benishma Malchus, it got back to Rome. Rome heard about this conversation. Omer, so what do they say? Yehuda Sheila Yis'ala. Yehuda that spoke positive about Rome, he's going to be elevated. And that's answers our question why he became Rosh HaMedabrim. They made it so that he's so respected that in any conversation he speaks first. That was the Rome's giving him reward for talking positive about Rome. You have to remember this was also a very dangerous time. Rome was just after after Bar Kokhba. The government wants to keep things stable. They don't need bad narrative. So
Is he a brown argument?
so
Well, I'm asking.
I don't know.
Rabbi Shimon is saying, like, no.
Well,
we don't go there.
Rabbi Huda had to assume this was a private conversation. So we have to assume Rabbi Huda actually felt that way. Because this was supposed to be a private conversation. This was not supposed to be he wasn't saying it for the intention that Yehuda, the son of the Gerim, of the converts, was going to go and get repeated until it got back to Rome. This was supposed to be a safe conversation. That was his opinion. He felt if you look at it in the bigger picture, it could have been worse. And there are positives. They're doing services, and we have to acknowledge and be grateful for the services. Like you, Mordechai, right? Like that's conversations going on today. In different words, but that's the conversations that people are having today of how we view things. Are Jews supposed to be critical of their host countries? Or just be grateful that we're able to study Torah, right?
Instead of stitching to the Romans today, they'll say, "Oh, you're not America first."
Something like that. Yeah.
And he certainly learned that from the Rebbe. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
But the Rebbe was positive.
Totally.
So there you go. But Yossi, so Yehuda got an upgrade. He was raised to be the one who talks first. Yossi that he was silent. They didn't just pass on him; they punished him, but in a way of kind of Yiglel Tzipori. He's going to be sent off to Tzipori, which is really where he was from. Tzipori, we know now, everyone is it's kind of west of Tiberia, up in the mountains, later to become the center of Judaism. He told them basically, if you're not a person that's able to talk positive or say anything positive, just stay home. So they told him he's gullus, he's going to be stayed in, he has to stay in Tzipori. And what about Shimon, who spoke negative? Shigina, he spoke only negative about Rome. Yeah, he has to be put to death. That's it. It wasn't like a shocking ruling, right? That's what you have to do. So again, Tosfos says that this was not just any person. Yehuda ben Gerim was someone who later Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was his teacher, and he held of him as in other Gemaras we learned that he was a great person. He had, when Rabbi Shimon sent his son to get blessings, he sent it to Yehuda ben Gerim. So he was a person of stature, but he just this conversation was too much for him to hold in, and he said it, and he gets punished at the end for talking. Although it's a lesson there too. All right. Also, now what does Reb Shimon do? We're trying to get to how does Shimon end up in the cave? Azalhu Braid Tashu Bey Midrasha. He went right to the Beis Medrash. He hid there. He went to hide in the rafters of the Beis Medrash because they knew that they were sentenced to death. They figured it was kind of what do we have today? Tomorrow I'm going to blow up all the bridges and all the oil fields, and we're going to destroy everything. It doesn't really happen. They thought Rome was just talking, and the storm will kind of weather out, and then they'll be able to go home. So they didn't go too far. They just went to the yeshiva. They stay in the yeshiva. Kol yoyma have masilu devaisu rifta v'kuza demai v'krachi. They got every day their wife, Mrs. Bar Yochai, would come and bring a pitcher of water and some bread. Again, why so little? Because if she was going to cook up a feast, they come every day to the yeshiva with a tray that obviously would attract attention. So she stuck it in her bag, a little bit of bread and water. That was enough for them to live on. And they stayed. That was going okay. But the word got back to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai that the Romans were not giving up. They wanted to put Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai to death. And he was hearing rumors that coming into the Beis Medrash that they were interrogating his wife. Things were getting complicated. So he said to his son, listen, Amr Levrei said to son, Nashim Daitin Kalim Aleim, the woman may not have the strong will. Their minds are a bit loose, you get nervous, they could get overwhelmed. And Dilma Mitzarile Maganlan, they're gonna abuse them, and they're gonna reveal the secret that we're hiding in the Beis Medrash. So we have to go someplace that our wives don't even know where we are. No one can know where we are. Anyone who has the information may spill it. because the Romans are not giving up. So they leave the yeshiva. So they went and they hid in one of the caves in the Galilee. Israchish Nisa, immediately a miracle happens. Now the miracle is also questionable. What happens? God makes a big tree, and the tree is a tree of buxer. I mean, it wasn't even an apple tree. It was like a buxer. We know halachically buxer is what's the English? Buxer is carob, a carob tree. So the carob tree, halachically, carob is even questionable if it's human. If it's for human consumption. It was definitely primarily an animal feed. The people only ate it if there was nothing around. When I was growing up as a kid, we had a health neighbor that was very into trying to feed us carob. We hated it. But there's supposed to be a lot. The idea also, the carob has a lot of nutrients and sugar. So between that and water, God said that's what you're gonna eat. So they had the carob tree and they had the water. It was all miraculous. The Gemara says it was miraculous that it was created so fast. And so they ate from there, and then they would sit. The thing is, they didn't know how long they have to hide from the Romans. It wasn't like they didn't know so they had to strategize. So what do they have to be careful about? They have to be careful about their clothing don't get worn out. If they didn't come with a suitcase, they didn't have a change of clothing. So they would sit every day up into their neck in sand, naked, with the clothes folded on the side, and they studied Torah all day. The Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, what did they study? We did 12 years, 13.
They heard the thing.
No, they didn't have any books. They studied orally. There was no books then. Before the Mishnayos. So the Alter Rebbe says that's when he studied the Zohar. I mean, he studied Chassidus. He studied Kabbalah. Because the halacha, I mean, after a while, you cover all the laws. I mean, 13, I mean, they had no distractions, no child pickup, no child, PTA meetings, no one to cook supper for, no one to take the garbage out. They were 12 years straight, day and night, up into their neck, besides davening and sleeping, learning Torah. So a whole day they learned Torah. When they had a daven, they'd come out of the sand, put on their clothing, because davening you need to stand properly, clothed properly, and the actual clothing was a way of showing, like you put on a gartel, showing that we're getting ready for davening. You'd put on the clothing 3 times a day, and they would daven. And then they would take off the clothing, go back to the sand, and study Torah. This went on. They sat for 12 years eating one food, drinking water. They had no wine for Pesach, no matzah. We know that everything was the Alter Rebbe writes in Kuta Torah. Everything they did was spiritual. It wasn't like they had matzah. They had carobs. They had water. They had study that they studied by heart, and they davened. That's what they did for 12 years straight. After 12 years, Elio, this is when we get to Elijah the prophet, become a pischa de marasi. He stood by the gate by the entrance of the cave. And he spoke out loud. He says, "Man loidia lebar Yochai, who's going to let the son of Yochai know the miscaser batel gzerase? Who knows? Who's going to tell Bar Yochai that the Caesar's dead? His decrees are annulled, and basically it's okay to come out." So, getting the message from Elijah the prophet, and we know that again, Rabbi Shimon ben Levi meets Elijah the prophet many years later at that same cave. So he says he hears the message, and so he can go out. So he comes out, and it says so. He says. Nafku, they come out. Obviously, they get dressed. Now, you have to understand something. They weren't just studying in yeshiva for 12 years. Rabbi Akivah studied in yeshiva for how many years? 24 years. But he was in a structure. He was amongst people. He studied he had teachers. He had a schedule. He went to shul. He went to the mikvah. These guys were in a cave for 12 years, seeing no one. They don't even see Elijah. He's just standing outside the window. He doesn't even want to go in. He's scared to even go into the cave.
I forget who was in there with them.
His son, Rabbi Shimon. So his son is in there with him. Elijah doesn't even want to go into the cave. He's just talking outside the cave, like making an announcement, hoping they hear. And so they're really intense. They're super intense. We're going to learn later that the level of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai went from as great as he was before the cave, super after the cave. I mean, everything, he's like the Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. When we're going to celebrate his Yom Tov tomorrow night, he went to another level. What's the effect he had? He was so cut off from the world that everything worldly became disgusting to him. Even things that were mundane and normal for people to do, that people expected to do. We live in the world. He couldn't understand it. He was so caught up in the world, and he was so engrossed in Torah day and night. He was like, he sees people that are plowing and sowing, people are working. So he was shocked. How do people work? How could you give up eternal life of Torah and you're just taking care of chayesha, things that are temporary? Why are you even focusing on your job? Rashi says, others say that if you really believed in God, you would believe that you'll get your substance. Look, we got the carob tree just showed up. We got the water showed up. What are you spending so much time out there in the field working? How are you start studying Torah? They were totally shocked. They couldn't understand it. Yes, it was almost as if they don't remember before the 12 years before. I mean, they lived in the world before. But it was almost as if whatever happened before was erased. They were like, you call it trauma, you could call it whatever it was, the effect that the 12 years had on them, that they were in a totally another league. So they said, what's going on? So Kol Malkim Shnoisim Enayim, and because they reached such highs, anything they looked at, and they saw someone working, someone doing something, Miyad Nisraf, the place, whatever the person was doing, burnt. They were destroying everything. They had like these laser beams coming out of the eyes. Whatever they looked at, they saw someone have a bankruptcy, gone. Everything was gone.
Like Superman?
Like Superman.
Wait, lasers coming out of their eyes?
It doesn't say laser. Wherever they looked at me, Nisraf was burnt.
On that point, just a thought that I've had like last year or maybe. So there's an idea that like at Major they fell out that Esau, only his head was buried there. The rest of the body was
Separate.
And so Esau kind of represents Adam, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking like, did you say Rabbi Shimon buried himself underground and only his head being out?
It's like extreme of that.
It was a tikkun. He did a tikkun in the frame of 12.
It's an idea.
Also,
I hear you saying it's an idea. So he's burning up the world because they're so what happens? Yatsa Baskal Varmalam, a voice from heaven comes out and says, you came out of the cave to destroy my world. God created a world. Everyone's supposed to have a job. Go out to the world, work. God says, what are you doing? you guys are like supercharged. Go back. Goes go back to the cave. God tells him, get back into the cave. So they went back to the cave and they sat an additional 12 months. Why? The Gemara tells us why. This was equivalent to the full time a person has to spend in hell. The max a person could spend in hell, that's why we say Kaddish 11 months. The reason we say Kaddish 11 months for our parents is because we don't want to say that our parents deserve to be in hell 12 months. So we do 11 months, because if we said it 12 months, we say our parents are so bad, they needed the full time in hell. But the max you could stay in hell is 12 months. They had to stay the full term in the tent, in the cave, as a punishment, as equivalent to hell. It says, Amri, the Gemara says, Mishpat Rishayim b'Gehenim, Shnei Masar Chodesh. Leave it, that they were punished, the extreme punishment you could get for doing what they did, for destroying the world, for not understanding. You have to be sensitive that there's a process, and there's certain people.
It's like a shogeg kind of thing, right?
No, actually, it's not shogeg, because they should have known better.
Really? But like all of a sudden, like there I am, and I walk out, and I see a girl in a bathing suit, and I look over there, and the next thing I know, she's dead. Whatever it is, so, and then I look over and boom, so it doesn't feel like amazing.
No, because they were judging. They weren't just looking; they were judging well. They were judging, and the God said, "What are you judging for?" So they got the full judgment. And the thing is, what's incredible is this is what you see about something about holiness. A little bit what you were talking about, Mordechai. If what they did was wrong, how were they able to punish through looking? I mean, punishing through looking means they punish through holiness. So we see there's a concept where you could misuse holiness. They were so holy, and therefore, when they looked at it, they were able to burn it. Otherwise, would they have the power to burn it? But nevertheless, they're punished the full sentence of hell, 12 months, because they misused this holiness, and they should have known better how to process this information. which is itself a concept. Because we suffer from this till today, where people will think they're holier than thou and they judge others, and you have to it's not a statement about if you're right or wrong, but how you look at someone else is a statement. It means it's okay to be holy and right and everything's Torah, but that doesn't give you the right to judge someone else. And it's not a contradiction to what you're doing, because here they're holy enough to destroy the world, but they get punished the full sentence. All right, Mishpat Yeshua. So we have a few minutes to just finish it up. Yotze Baskal said, "Just go back there." After 12 months, they come out, and Rabbi Shimon is changed. His son is not. Rabbi Lazar is still burning things, and Rabbi Shimon already kind of graduated and realized that that's not the way. So anything he destroyed, he fixed. So Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Lazar is still destroying things with his eyes. Rabbi Shimon's like, fix it. And he said to him like this, a funny and interesting thing. He says, "B'ni dai la'olam ani va'ata." It's enough that you and I are in this world. Not everyone is going to be on our level. You have to understand that. Regular person goes out there and has to work with life. You have to understand that the world has different jobs for different people. There has to be the tzaddik. And Rabbi Yochai stayed the holy person he was till today. We're going to celebrate his celebration, but he says that's not for everyone. That's just, if you and I, that's enough.
And what? And the son didn't cop it?
He chopped it a bit, but then the Gemara says this is where they really saw it. It's a beautiful ending. They walk out, and it's Friday afternoon. You see an old man, an old man, running with two hadassim. This is the custom that you see till today in Yerushalayim. People holding two hadassim, running with the two good smelling herbs. And he said, "What are you doing? Why are you running with the two herbs?" So he says the Chav Shabbos. It's for Shabbos. And for the honor of Shabbos, I want these hadassim. So they said, "Why do you need two? The Tiskei L'Chav Chad, one should be enough." There's no. One is for Zocher Shem Shabbos Katshay, and one is for Shomer Shabbos Shem Shabbos Katshay. We have two different languages in the Torah. In the first commandments and the second time in the Ten Commandments, I want to honor both the Zocher and the Shomer. When they saw that, you could be in this world, you could live in this world normal, but what's your primary? What drives you? You work a whole week. It drives you is you're going to buy an hadas for Shabbos. That's everything that leads the whole 6 days of the week. So you could have that hadas and run into your good Shabbos. When they saw that, Amrle Brei, he told his son, "Chazi, look, kama chavivin mitzvah Yisrael. Look how special the mitzvahs on the Jewish people that he's buying two. That's what he's thinking about. It's Shabbos to buy two things. Yosef Zaytayu, so then Rabbi Lazar also calmed down. They stopped destroying things, so you didn't have to keep him in check. And just we have to stop here, but I just want to finish off that the Gemara just say it outside. The Gemara continues to say that his son-in-law, Pinchas ben Yair, was used to be able to ask him, challenge everything he asked. When he came after Rabbi Shimon was at such a high level that he was able to challenge him back double what he was able to challenge him. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai came out and he finished off with fixing the city of Tveria. He went out there and he said, wherever there's destruction, what can I do to help the city? So they said, well, we don't know where people are buried. And he came, miraculously figured out where everyone was buried. He showed all the signs. The person kind of made a comment, a jab at Reb Shimon. Oh, you're just like making things, he's still Reb Shimon. He looked at him and he turned into a pile of bones. And then the Gemara ends up a little sad. And that's how we're going to finish. He says like this. At the end, he says, he comes and he meets this Yehuda ben Gerim. He sees this Yehuda, his former student, who was the one who told everyone what was happening. He's the one who told the story and it got out to Rome. And Reb Shimon saw him, he said, this guy's still around? And he also turned into a heap of bones, which is it's sad because from Tosfos and Gemara season, Reb Steinzal says it also, he wasn't a bad person. And, that's life. It's the things that sometimes are intense.
Great.
So
Rabbi David.